For over 2 decades, Darren McGrady remained silent, watching from the sidelines as the royal story unfolded, carefully shaped by those in power. As a former royal chef who served the Queen, Prince Charles, and the young princes, McGrady was no ordinary employee. His loyalty was to Princess Diana. Now, at 63, he has decided to speak out. But what he shares isn't just personal, it's explosive. At the center of these startling revelations is Queen Camilla. What Darren has revealed challenges the very core of royal storytelling. Everything changed with one unexpected comment, a remark that sparked a storm Darren never anticipated. As preparations were underway for the coronation of King Charles III and Queen Camilla, the former chef, closely tied to Diana's memory, surprised many by expressing public support. "The first time I saw Princess Diana was at Buckingham Palace, the royal wedding," he recalled. "Time has moved on," Darren said, and he believes it's possible to honor the present while still respecting the past. Though his statement appeared calm and respectful, the backlash was immediate. Social media exploded. Loyal supporters of both the royal family and Princess Diana clashed online. Some praised Darren's maturity and his attempt to reconcile the past and present, but many felt deeply betrayed. "Diana's spirit will never rest if you celebrate the woman who broke her," read one comment. Another accused him directly, "You were her chef, her confidant. You should be exposing Camilla, not supporting her." Darren had long been viewed as a silent guardian of Diana's legacy, a man who chose not to speak out of respect. He had never publicly mentioned the woman many still hold responsible for Diana's heartache. His silence on Camilla, in particular, had always raised questions. Over the years, Darren gave interviews but consistently avoided discussing her. He never directly addressed Camilla Parker Bowles, once labeled the most hated woman in Britain. Given how central her affair with Charles was to Diana's pain, his silence was telling. The public didn't forget. Even in 2005, polls showed only 7% of Britain supported Camilla as queen. So when she was finally crowned in 2023 and Darren offered his approval, it felt like a betrayal of everything he once represented. The headlines were explosive. Darren McGrady was finally breaking his silence. And what he revealed about Queen Camilla was more troubling than anyone expected. But before diving into that, it's important to understand Darren's life inside the palace, his early years and growing bond with Princess Diana. In 1982, when Darren first entered the gates of Buckingham Palace, he was a young chef, ranked at the bottom of the kitchen staff, number 20 of 20. The kitchen was ruled by tradition and strict hierarchy. Darren, fresh and eager, could never have imagined how closely he would one day be connected to one of the most adored figures in royal history, Princess Diana. That year also marked the birth of Prince William, and with it, the beginning of a connection that would stretch from the royal kitchens to private sorrow, from professional duty to personal loyalty. Darren first saw Diana at Balmoral Castle, where the royal family spent summers. She was just as beautiful up close. At that time, Darren's job was modest. He prepared frozen vegetables and learned under senior French chef Gabriel Tscoumi, who not only taught him culinary skills but also how to navigate the palace's unspoken etiquette. Despite the formality and distance that defined palace life, Diana brought a rare warmth. Unlike other royals, she didn't send staff with instructions. Instead, she walked barefoot into the kitchen, dressed casually, and asked for simple things like yogurt, fruit, or juice for herself or her sons. She always thanked the staff and even helped clean up. Her authenticity stood out in a place built on tradition and protocol. From the beginning, Diana's presence lit up the palace. She laughed at formal dinners, danced at events, and brought humanity to an otherwise rigid world. Darren always addressed her formally, but over time, their connection deepened through everyday routines. One of those was her nightly request for fresh juice, carrot, celery, or apple, depending on her mood. But Darren began to notice subtle changes. As Diana's marriage with Charles fell apart, largely due to his relationship with Camilla, her appetite began to wane. One night, she didn't request her usual juice. Concerned, Darren made it anyway. She drank it quickly, her eyes red and puffy as if she'd been crying. Long before the tabloids caught wind, Darren saw the emotional burden Diana carried. In 1992, Diana and Charles formally separated. She left Buckingham Palace and moved into Kensington Palace with her sons. Darren thought his role in her life had ended, until a surprising call came. Diana wanted him to be her personal chef. He agreed immediately. Life at Kensington was simpler, more intimate. But the shadow of Camilla lingered. Rumors circulated, including one where Camilla supposedly told a friend, "He's officially mine. He always has been." Darren didn't know whether Diana had heard that, but he saw how deeply she was affected. Still, she remained composed. Even in pain, she never lashed out. That, Darren later said, was what made her Diana. And as their friendship grew, so did his understanding of the woman behind the public image. As he witnessed more of her pain, it became clear that Camilla was always at the heart of it. It was an unexpected friendship, a royal chef and a princess. What had Diana shared with him behind those kitchen doors? "I always knew I would never be queen," she once said. Despite the calm she tried to maintain at Kensington Palace, the weight of her past never left her. The broken marriage, years of emotional betrayal, and Camilla Parker Bowles' constant presence haunted her. Though her surroundings seemed elegant and controlled, only a few truly saw her vulnerability. One of them was Darren McGrady, her royal chef. One evening after dinner, as Darren was cleaning up, Diana quietly entered the kitchen, not seeking food, but solace. She stood silently for a while before whispering, "I've always known I'd never be queen. That girl who took my husband, she will be." Darren was stunned. He had no words, but she wasn't looking for a response. "You only had to listen," she added, wiping away a tear. In that moment, the pain she had carried for so long came pouring out. She feared not only being abandoned as a wife but being forgotten as the woman once meant to be Queen of England. Prince Charles's devotion to Camilla had caused wounds no headline could fully capture. Darren remembered the loud, painful arguments echoing through the palace halls, always with Camilla's name at the center. When the infamous tapes between Charles and Camilla were made public in 1993, the world was shocked. But Darren had already seen the reality behind the palace walls. Diana never discussed the tapes directly with him, she didn't need to. Her silence, the loss of appetite, and the sadness in her eyes spoke volumes. Her eating disorder worsened, and Darren quietly watched, careful never to intrude. Then came the 1995 BBC Panorama interview. Diana's haunting words, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded," shook the monarchy to its core. For the first time, millions heard her truth. She spoke openly about self-harm and seeking help in all the wrong ways, offering strength to others battling the same darkness. For Darren, it wasn't new. But now, the world was finally listening. Amid the pain, she began to reclaim her life. A year into her new chapter at Kensington, Darren noticed a shift. She smiled more, her eating improved, and she threw herself into meaningful causes. In a bold and powerful move, she publicly addressed her bulimia, turning personal struggle into a message of hope for many. "She looked the healthiest I'd ever seen her," Darren said. She was slowly becoming herself again. Then came the day she didn't return. It was a quiet Sunday morning at Kensington Palace, and Darren was preparing a simple meal for Diana, who was expected back from Paris that evening. She was supposed to reunite with her sons, Prince William and Harry, before school resumed. It was meant to be a peaceful, family-focused day, an ordinary moment amid royal chaos. But everything changed without warning. The television suddenly displayed a breaking news alert: Princess Diana in car crash. It was 20 years ago that the tragic accident happened in a Paris tunnel. At first, Darren couldn't believe it. He thought it might be a hoax. But the story quickly spread across every channel. The horrifying truth sank in: Diana had died in a car crash while being chased by paparazzi. She was just 36. In disbelief, Darren rushed to work, still clinging to a faint hope that the reports were exaggerated. But when the palace delivered her will, reality struck. There would be no return, no reunion, no comforting her sons. Diana was gone. The staff at Kensington Palace, those who had served and supported her, were devastated. Darren remembered how her meal sat waiting, untouched, prepared for a dinner that would never happen. The world responded with shock and grief. Crowds gathered outside Kensington Palace, covering its gates with flowers. The sorrow was profound. Elton John's reworked Candle in the Wind became the global anthem of mourning. Amid this overwhelming sadness, a quieter controversy emerged. Rumors swirled that Camilla Parker Bowles wanted to attend Diana's funeral, possibly to ease the public's resentment. Some thought her presence might show respect or signal healing. But Queen Elizabeth reportedly intervened, insisting that Camilla not attend. Darren believed this was the right choice. The world would never have forgiven her, he said. Her appearance would have felt like returning to the scene of a tragedy she helped cause. That decision cleared the way for a funeral the world would never forget. Yet another emotional moment still lingered, the wedding Darren chose not to attend. His quiet protest came when Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles were finally married on April 9, 2005. It was a private stand against a public betrayal. It was presented as the gentle conclusion to a decades-long royal saga. The ceremony, held quietly at Windsor Guildhall and followed by a blessing at St. George's Chapel, was intended to symbolize peace and closure. For many, it felt like a long-overdue union. However, for Darren McGrady, the former royal chef who had supported Princess Diana through her most painful years, it was far from a happy ending. "I didn't watch. I didn't attend. I couldn't," Darren later admitted. In his heart, that day still belonged to Diana. Though McGrady had relocated to the United States and established a successful catering business, his emotional bond with the late Princess of Wales remained unbroken. As Charles and Camilla's wedding neared, his phone lit up, not with congratulatory messages, but with quiet concerns from former palace colleagues. Many had worked closely with Diana, and they all shared a deep, unsettled feeling. The ceremony felt cold, wrong, almost as if history itself was being carefully rewritten. To McGrady, the marriage wasn't just a new beginning, it marked a turning point. In his words, it was a quiet erasure of Diana's suffering and legacy. "They got what they wanted," he said, "but the cost was Diana." More disturbing were the whispers that followed Camilla's arrival. Loyal staff who had once served Diana were either reassigned or dismissed. Charities she had championed were neglected. Her once vibrant presence within the palace began to fade, like a portrait removed from a wall without a word. One memory stayed with Darren, a quiet confession from Diana, "I'll never be queen. That girl who took my husband will be queen someday." On Charles and Camilla's wedding day, those words rang louder than ever. Darren wasn't alone in noticing. What was unfolding behind palace doors seemed far more calculated than the public knew. Camilla's quiet elimination of Diana's memory sparked a haunting question: had this been the plan all along? For years after Diana's tragic death, Darren McGrady remained silent. He grieved, respected her memory, and possibly held back because the truth he carried felt too heavy to speak aloud. His silence was not emptiness, it was filled with unspoken sorrow, vivid memories, and a growing concern about changes happening within the palace. When he finally spoke, the impact of his words rippled far beyond Buckingham Palace. In his 60s now, McGrady had worked closely with Diana and knew her not as a royal figurehead, but as a compassionate, spirited woman who brought warmth to the palace's cold, formal halls. When Camilla moved into Clarence House and later Buckingham Palace, McGrady observed unsettling changes. It started subtly, so subtly most wouldn't notice. But those who had known Diana well could sense her presence being erased, piece by piece. The delicate touches Diana had added to her rooms began to disappear, the soft pastels she loved, cherished family photographs, and the English roses she adored. Even her favorite flowers, forget-me-nots and lilies, were replaced with Camilla's preferences. Furniture was rearranged or removed entirely. It didn't feel like redecorating, it felt like rewriting the past. To McGrady, this wasn't about aesthetics, it was about memory. He watched as Diana's influence was quietly stripped away. Perhaps the most painful symbol of all was what became of her photographs. Once proudly displayed in the palace's corridors, reflecting joy, maternal love, and warmth, they began to disappear. Initially, they were moved to less prominent areas, then tucked away in private rooms, and eventually, they vanished altogether. Only one photo remained, hidden in a private space the public never saw. But even that last image didn't survive. After a few years, it was removed as well. For McGrady, that was the breaking point. It wasn't even Diana anymore, he said. It was just a photograph, and even that was too much. That was when he uttered the words that spread across headlines worldwide, "She is pure evil." It wasn't said for attention, nor out of bitterness, it came from shock and a place of love for the woman he had served and admired. He believed these changes weren't coincidental. They were intentional, calculated actions designed to push Diana out of both public memory and private spaces. While palace officials dismissed the changes as part of a new era or a natural evolution, McGrady and others close to Diana didn't believe that explanation. This wasn't simply moving forward, it was reworking the past. McGrady reflected on how starkly different the two women were. Diana had brought laughter, spontaneity, and empathy to the palace. She would walk barefoot into the kitchen for orange juice or quietly pack blankets for the homeless into her car. Her spirit was unmistakable. But with Camilla's arrival, that light was gone. The palace grew colder, quieter, and less compassionate. Though Camilla's rise from private partner to queen consort unfolded, McGrady remained mostly quiet, living in the US, running his business, and continuing to honor Diana's legacy through charitable work. Still, witnessing Camilla's ascension stirred deep emotions in him. He supported the coronation because he believed in progress, but not at the cost of the past. Moving forward, he insisted, should never mean covering up what came before. In the royal family, personal items follow strict rules. Every detail, even something as ordinary as a photograph, is carefully managed. Unlike typical families who can redecorate as they please, royal households treat every object, from chairs to portraits, with significance, tied to a broader legacy. There are well-defined procedures in place, especially for personal items like wedding photos. These objects aren't simply moved or replaced without serious thought. Tradition requires multiple layers of approval, from the master of the household to the Royal Collection Trust, and even the sovereign. Nothing is removed or discarded without private deliberation. But those protocols were ignored when Princess Diana's famous wedding portrait was taken down at Clarence House. There was no formal process or respectful preservation. It wasn't relocated to a private space or added to the royal archives, it was simply discarded, violating royal tradition. Camilla's arrival marked more than a new chapter in the household, it represented a break from the past. The portrait, once symbolizing Diana's role in the monarchy, disappeared without ceremony, a move that seemed to reflect a desire to erase a painful chapter of royal history. Darren McGrady's emotional revelations quickly stirred a wave of public reaction. Within hours of his interview going live, social media lit up with support. His heartfelt and honest comments gave voice to long-held suspicions, especially among those loyal to Diana. Many had felt for years that she was treated unjustly, both during her life and after her death. One person wrote, "Darren, thank you for finally telling the truth. You've said what so many of us have believed for years." Thousands echoed that sentiment, praising McGrady's sincerity and deep loyalty to Diana. For many, his words served as long-awaited confirmation, offering an insider's view of what the public had always suspected but never fully confirmed. However, not everyone welcomed his comments. Some critics questioned the timing and motivation behind his statements. "Why wait until after the coronation?" one person asked. Others accused him of trying to attract attention or capitalize on past wounds. Yet his supporters quickly defended him, noting his silence for over 20 years. "If anyone has earned the right to speak, it's him," one supporter commented. As McGrady's words reignited interest in Diana's legacy, old interviews, videos, and quotes resurfaced across the internet. Fan pages dedicated to her saw an explosion of new followers, showing that public affection for Diana remains powerful. McGrady's comments reopened emotional wounds that had never fully healed. Now, with his claims making headlines, Queen Camilla faces perhaps the greatest challenge to her public image. Over the years, she had gradually shifted from being seen as the other woman to becoming a more accepted figure by Charles's side. But McGrady's revelations cast a harsh spotlight on her past, leading many to wonder what lies ahead. While royal supporters argue that Camilla deserves her place and should be allowed to move on, others, especially Diana's loyal followers, are not so forgiving. To them, Camilla's rise to the throne feels inseparable from betrayal and pain. Inside the palace, officials have stuck to the royal mantra, never complain, never explain. But silence may no longer be enough. With McGrady's words coming so close to Camilla's coronation, the pressure is mounting. The world is watching her more closely than ever. How long can she maintain the image the public has come to accept? And what are your thoughts on McGrady's revelations? Share them in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.